27th day of July, and whether you're here in person or watching us on Facebook and YouTube, we thank you for coming our way and taking part in our service here at Oak Hill. We hope you receive a blessing for being here with us this morning, and that something we say and do here might help you in the week ahead. So we encourage everyone to participate, rejoice in the Lord here with us this day, and hopefully you'll be uplifted when you leave here this morning. All right, a few announcements I mentioned of the day. First of all, Brother Sam and Sister Cindy are still away on vacation, so be sure and be in prayer for them. They have a safe trip and a good trip and make it back safe and sound. This morning is Youth Fund offering. There's a plate up in the back with labeled Youth Fund. If you'd like to give the Youth Fund, please make a donation there, and we'll apply it to the things we do for our young people, which is primarily feeding them on Wednesday, but then also any trips we take with them, any activities we do also comes out of this fund. So if you'd like to give to that, the plate's up in the back. This morning, since Brother Sam is away, you've got me to fill the pulpit. Thank you for staying, thus far anyway. Appreciate it. Certainly pray for me as I stand before you that I can remember everything I want to say in a orderly fashion of some kind. Saturday, August the 2nd at 7 a.m., we're going to have yard cleaning up here, or earlier if you can get here. We need to weed some weeds out of the flower bed and just clean up the place a little bit in preparation for homecoming. And then next Sunday morning, August the 3rd, is building fund offering, and that money is used to pay for all major repairs and expenses we have up here. So if you'd like to give the building fund, that's next Sunday. And then next Sunday evening will be business meeting, where we discuss all this and plan for our future and how we're going to spend that money. So come back for that if you can. And then Sundays, August the 10th, is homecoming. This will be our 122nd year here. So we will have potluck lunch following services, and then we will come back up here for a time of reminiscing and just fellowshipping a little bit. And then after that, we'll dismiss for the day. So that's the August the 10th. Be sure and put that on your calendar and make plans to attend that if you can. All right, that's all the announcements I have. Anyone else got anything this morning? Next Sunday, right? Yes. So we'll have baptism here next Sunday. Anything else? Take your time. I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, Oak Hill Missionary Baptist Church. Good to see everybody this morning. It's a wonderful day to be in the house of the Lord. And you just heard I now have my marching orders. Turn with me to page number 1. Page number 1. I'm pressing on the upward way, new heights I'm gaining every day, still praying as I onward bound. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand, my faith on heaven's tableland, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. My heart has no desire to stay where doubts arise and fears dismay, though some may dwell where these abound. My prayer, my aim is higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand, my faith on heaven's tableland, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. I want to scale the utmost height and catch a gleam of glory bright, but still I'll pray till heaven I found. Lord, lead me on to higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand, my faith on heaven's tableland, plain that I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. Woo, y'all sound good this morning. Turn to page number 24. Page number 24. cup's overrun. Oh, say but I'm glad. Let's sing that third verse. We have a fellowship rich and sweet, tough and very late. Living in Him is a blessed treat. Oh, say but I'm glad. Oh, say but I'm glad, I'm glad. Oh, say but I'm glad. Jesus has come and my cup's overrun. Oh, say but I'm glad. Won't you come to Him with all your care, weary and worn and sad? You too will sing as His love you share. Oh, say but I'm glad. Oh, say but I'm glad, I'm glad. Oh, say but I'm glad. Jesus has come and my cup's overrun. Oh, say but I'm glad. Page number 4. Page number 4. Jesus went up on the mountain that He might commune with God. He prayed on the hills of old Judea, which my blessed Savior trod. He prayed, He prayed, He prayed, He prayed. Jesus prayed unto the Father every day. From the manger to the cross, not a moment's time was lost. Jesus prayed unto the Father all the way. All alone while in the garden where He sweat great drops of blood, He prayed, He prayed. Not my will but thine be done. My Father was His prayer to God. He prayed, He prayed, He prayed, He prayed. Jesus prayed unto the Father every day. From the manger to the cross, not a moment's time was lost. Jesus prayed unto the Father all the way. When upon the cross of Calvary in His agony and pain, He prayed, He prayed, that the Father might forgive them whom the Son of God had slain. He prayed, He prayed, He prayed, He prayed. Jesus prayed unto the Father every day. From the manger to the cross, not a moment's time was lost. Jesus prayed unto the Father all the way. Brother Russ.
11:01. What part of take your time did you not understand? I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. I guess it's been about 3 years ago now. Brother Sam was having some health issues, and he was away from us for, I don't know, about a month. And we were having trouble filling the pulpit, finding people to preach for him. And so the church voted to allow the deacons to fill the pulpit. I'm not sure if that was a good decision or not, but nonetheless, it's what we've been doing for the last couple of years. And this time is my turn today. And so I was here last year, and I think the day after, I started thinking about what I was going to say next time, literally. And I had something in mind, pretty close to it, by May of this year. That tells you how long it takes me to make up my mind on something. But I had something pretty close in mind what I was going to talk about. Well, then Brother Jeff gets up here, and he does his sermon on self-doubt. And now I wasn't going to talk about self-doubt, but a lot of the things he touched on I had thought about talking about. And that night, Brother Gene taught the lesson, and he touched on a lot of other things I was going to talk about. So I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe God doesn't want me to talk about that after all. I didn't want to step on what they've been saying, and I didn't want to bore people to death with repeat. So I'm starting to think, well, what do I need to talk about? So I have from May now, or from 1st of June now, to today to decide this. And the Friday before Father's Day, I get a phone call, and Brother Sam is ill. He's in Little Rock undergoing test, and we didn't know for sure if he was going to be able to be here that Sunday. So we need to come up with plan B just in case. And I got together some thoughts on a devotional for that Sunday morning, and like I said, it was Father's Day, so that gave me a topic. And that's half the battle for me, because I can't never figure out enough of something to say it, you know, to fill the time. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to do a devotional on Father's Day. Well, as it turns out, Brother Sam got well enough he could come back and preach that Sunday, and I didn't get to do it. So I'm back to square one again, trying to figure out what I'm going to do this morning. And the clock's ticking. And I keep thinking about things and keep thinking about things. Finally, I decided, you know, I'm never going to get to do that Father's Day sermon because I won't be filling in for him on Father's Day probably anytime. So guess what? You're going to get the Father's Day sermon this morning. Now, it is very father-centric. It's aimed at fathers, but it's not aimed at Father's Day. Father's Day is a greeting card holiday. It has nothing to do with that, but it does have to do with fathers. And I am going to touch on that quite a bit this morning. But I also think it's applicable any time. At least that's my story, and that's what I'm sticking to. So hopefully you'll agree with me. If you don't, I'm sure you'll let me know after service. Now, this morning, I want to point to a couple of scriptures in the book of Deuteronomy. Now, Deuteronomy is the 5th book of the Old Testament. It's Moses speaking, and it deals a lot with the law. And in fact, we're going to be in chapter 5 in just a minute. And chapter 5, a lot of you may be aware, is where the Ten Commandments reside. That's where it's recorded at. And we're going to talk about that in here in just a minute. So if you want to find Deuteronomy, I'll give you a minute to find that while I'm talking about other stuff here. In keeping with my theme of Father's and Father's Day, as it was, I did a Google search, and I went out and I asked it, how many times is Father used in the Bible? How many times is the word Father mentioned in the Bible? And it pointed me to this website that did a word count of the Bible, and one of the words that they had counted was actually Father, and it said that it had been used 979 times in the Bible. Now, that's a lot of times. Now, it seems to me, first of all, I didn't count them. I didn't go back and count them, so I don't know how accurate that is. But I do know, in doing the research for this little devotion I'm doing, it's out there a lot. So I suspect that's probably a pretty close approximation to the number of times it's out there. But it seems to me, anytime Father's being used, or a lot of times it's being used, it's an admonition from God to either do as our fathers did, or depending upon the time and circumstances, to not do as our fathers did. You know, we kind of had a checkered past, I guess, when we were the good guy or the bad guy. And in any event, whether we were the hero or the villain, it apparently is an important character in the Bible for it to be listed out there that often, I would think. Now, it was so important that it's included in the Ten Commandments. The fathers are included as one of the Ten Commandments, and that's where we're going to start this morning. I thought this was a logical place to start. So in Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 16, it says, to honor thy father and thy mother, as the Lord thy God hath commanded thee, that thy days may be prolonged, and that it may go well with thee in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Now, to honor thy father and thy mother, to me, means to respect them, to obey them, to take their advice, to revere them in some form. And anytime you do what God tells you to do, it's beneficial. Anytime he gives you guidance on something, you better listen to him. And in this case, he says, he may prolong your days if you do. But there's also a practical side to this. If you listen to your parents, they've been here a lot longer than you have. They've done more, seen more, been involved in more things, have dealt with a lot of stuff. They have a lot of knowledge that the younger generation doesn't have. And because of that, if you take their advice, you might have a lot easier time of it. You might be less stressed, and you might actually live a little longer. Who knows? Now, I know, unfortunately, that don't happen. The younger generation does not like being told what to do by the older generation. This goes back probably all the way to Adam and Eve. It's in our nature. We want to do it our own way, no matter how bad or good it turns out. We say we don't want to listen to anything they say until it happens and we wish we had. And this is natural. I mean, this has been going, this is a universal thing that every generation has dealt with since, like I say, since Adam and Eve. We generally think that our parents are behind the times, out of touch, old-fashioned, old fuddy-duddies. And I know that's an old term. Even my adjectives are old-fashioned. I want to tell you a story that I think kind of explains this a little better. It also fills some time. I started work in 1977, straight out of high school. I got back from my senior trip, and my cousin who worked at a bank in town called me and she said, we're needing tellers. Why don't you come in and apply for a job? And I needed to apply for a job because Mom and Dad did not want me sitting on the couch all summer. So I went in and I applied for a job at the bank. Well, a few days later, I get a call back from them, and they say, we want you to come in and we want you to go to work in our data processing department, which today would be called IT, and we want you to run our mainframe computer system. Now, my experiences with computers, you got to remember this is 1977. We didn't have home computers at that time. Computers had not been domesticated at all by this time. It was all strictly big business stuff. So my experience with computers was a pocket calculator, which I carried to class and probably wasn't supposed to. Joyce is smiling at me. Or the electric typewriter we had in typing class. We had one, and I wasn't allowed to use it. Joyce knows that, too. But that was my experience with computers. And my perception of a computer was what I'd seen watching Star Trek and Lost in Space, and most of the time they were depicted as a box with a lot of blinky lights on it. And you might have a mechanical voice that says, that does not compute, come up every now and then. So I go into the bank, and they lead me into this computer room. This room's at least as big as our old fellowship hall is over there, and the machine filled it. It filled the room up. It was very noisy. There was a big background hum all the time. The only light on it was the power light. I was kind of disappointed by that. Ironically, I was looking for a bunch more lights, but there weren't any lights, just that one. And it was extremely cold in the room. And it was that way because the computer generated a lot of heat, and it didn't like it. And if you didn't keep the room refrigerator cold, it would let you know about it by shutting itself down. And that was never a good thing. I didn't mind the cold too much, though, because from the time you walked in the door to the time you left, you only got to sit down maybe 5 minutes at any time. We were constantly moving. And the way this thing, and for that matter, and it was probably a good thing, because I stayed at trim 130 pounds the whole 15 years I worked in there. I mean, it was constant. Now, the way this worked, you'd go over to the command console, and you'd type in a command. You'd say, I want you to run savings, or I want you to run trust, or mortgage, or whatever it is you wanted to run. And at that point, it started telling me what to do. It didn't do it verbally, but it would come up on the screen and said, mount tapes, mount this. We had 4 big tape units in the room. These are reel-to-reel tapes, and we were constantly having to change these tapes out. We had what they called disk drives. These were about the size of a washing machine. You'd open the lid up, and inside would be what they call a disk pack. It was a plastic covered box, basically, and inside were 3 or 4 silver platters about the size of a dinner plate, and they would write data on these platters. We were constantly moving them around. They weighed about 20 pounds, and we were constantly moving them around. Now, that was a king-size version of a hard drive is what it was. Then we had, also in the room, we had a printer we had to feed all day long, and it was always hungry. We had a machine that sorted checks. You put the checks at one end of it, and it had a whole section that went all the way across the room, and it would sort these checks out in these pockets. And if it was a 10-digit account number, you had to run through there 10 times. And if you got your hands out of order when you picked them up, you ran through more than that because you had to go back. And then we had a machine that we created microfiche on. Microfiche is about that size. It's a piece of film. It would take pictures of all of our documents, all of our printouts, and it would list them on these pieces of microfiche. It was a lot easier to store 100 pages of microfiche than thousands of pages of paper. And I suspect somewhere out there in someone's vault, there's a box full of that stuff collecting dust, because banks never threw anything away, especially if it had data on it. This was all cutting-edge technology, state-of-the-art, worth $1 million in 1977 money at that time. Now, about every 10 years or so, there would be what they call a paradigm shift. Now, paradigm is just the way you did business, the procedures you followed, and how you did things. And it always revolved, when we had these shifts, it always revolved around processor speed, advancements, how fast the computer did stuff, or hard drive, how much data you could store, or memory, how much stuff you could do at one time simultaneously, or the hardware device that it was installed in. Everything, they kept making smaller and smaller. That was the whole purpose of it. And yet they still wanted to do more and more. I remember the first laptop I saw. It was about the size of a briefcase. It had maybe a 10, 12-inch screen on it. Probably weighed between 10, 12 pounds. Quite a bit different than what we have today. The first desktop PC we had was an IBM. It was a steel-cased machine, and with the monitor sitting on top of it, probably weighed close to 50 pounds. They built it like they did cars in those days, big and heavy. All of that was cutting edge at the time, and very expensive to have. A whole lot more expensive than what we buy today is, even. But 50 years later, this phone probably has as much processing power and data storage as that mainframe computer had, making that machine, and a lot of machines that come since, totally obsolete. If you want to see one of these computers today, you're going to have to go to a museum someplace, or possibly my workshop, because I don't throw anything away either. So. Now, I said all that to say this. Society is the same way. Only the paradigm shifts in society happen more often than every 10 years. Every time someone gets a bright idea, brilliant idea, whatever you want to call it, a new fad, a new trend, a new style comes into being, and it changes our lives. Right? We get to where we eat different, we dress and look different, we act different, all to, mimic these new styles and whatnot. And if they get their way, we even sometimes think different. You see, society today is a lot like that. Certainly changed a lot than what it has been, what it used to be. And if you don't keep up with all these trends, if you don't keep up with all these changes that take place, it isn't long before you become out of step, behind the times, old-fashioned, and like those computers I was talking about a minute ago, obsolete. No, it's not. Now, let me tell you something. Morals and ethics never go out of style. In fact, they don't really ever change. The way we view them and the way we perceive them and carry them out may. Usually it means we stop doing them entirely for the most part. But they never change. The important stuff never changes. It's always important. It's always like that. Common sense, which is just another word, another name for wisdom, should always be in demand. It should never go away. If you can mentor somebody with on morals or ethical issues, if you can bestow some common sense wisdom that is born out of hard-earned experiences that you've lived and help them get through life, you're worth your weight in gold. Because apparently it's in short supply these days. We should not let trends and fads intimidate us, no matter how old you are or young you are. Don't worry about keeping up with social media and being able to handle that, do all that. Don't worry about having the fastest, bestest computer, because in a few weeks, months, or years, it's all going to change anyway. None of that's going to be the same very long. Someone else will come up with a new fad and, wipes it out. Even the most hip of us, and I know that's an old word too, even the most hip of us eventually is going to say enough's enough, and that's just a crazy ideal, and I'm not going to do it. And one day, and then they're going to join the rest of the So Funny days at that point. So my recommendation to fathers especially is to be fathers. Bestow upon your children the advice and wisdom of your years and your experience. It doesn't matter if they want to hear it or not, because actually, in essence, it's our job to do so. I mean, I think that's what God intended. Now, we're going to move on to Deuteronomy chapter 32. Let's see if I can get there. And in verse 7, verse 7. Now, this is Moses talking to the Israelites, and he says, "Remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. Ask thy father, and he will show thee thy elders, and they will tell thee." Now, I understand that Moses lived to be about 120 years old. In his lifetime, he was tasked with leading the Israelites out of Egypt, out of the bondage of Egypt. He was tasked with leading them across the Red Sea. He was tasked with getting them through the wilderness. And at this point, they're on the cusp of entering into the Promised Land. And apparently, they had forgotten all that. They had forgotten everything God had done for them, and they had backslid back the way they were when they were in Egypt. They were even doing idolatry. And Moses is telling them, hey, you need to remember what it was like in Egypt, how bad it was, and how God has helped you to get through it. What you doing here? And if you got a question, ask your father. Or if you got a question, ask your elders, and they'll tell you about this. You need to remember this stuff. Man is notorious for having a short memory when it comes to God. We are never closer to God than when we are in trouble, and never further away than when things are going good. And that may sound like a misnomer, but it's really the truth. If we have an issue, if we have a problem, what do? We're knocking on God's door saying, hey, we need your help. We're scared. We got a problem. We're sick. We need something. And then we start bargaining with him. We say, if you will do this, I'll go to church every Sunday. I'll give money every time the offering plate's passed. I'll be in prayer every day. I'll be the most pious person you ever met. And then things get better. The problems go away, your health returns, whatever it is, and then it becomes more like, God who? You know? I never said that. Now, I don't think we ought to be too critical of the Israelites, though, because they're not the only ones with the issue. The United States of America is probably the most blessed nation in recent times. They probably give Israel a run for their money, really, on the blessings that God's given us. Israel's been around a lot longer. I'll give you a case in point for that, a relatively recent one. And when I say recent, in the last 100 years. World War I ended in 1918. It was the war to end all wars. Millions of people were killed in it. Thousands of Americans were killed in it. And couple that with the Spanish flu pandemic that hit at the same time, where at least that many more died from that, it were dismal times. It was terrible. That decade was just a terrible time. And we were, I would say, a pretty godly nation. We were in churches. We were in prayer. We were asking God to help us. And he did. And we got through all that stuff. 1920, 2 years after the war ends. It's called the Roaring Twenties. It's not called the Roaring Twenties because we invented jet engines. It was called the Roaring Twenties because we went off the deep end, at least in the cities. Now, the countryside may not so much, but in the cities, anything went and did, including morals out the window. In the 1920s, we partied like there was no tomorrow and enjoyed ourselves immensely. The economy was great, and it became a consumer nation at that point. We started buying up everything we could find. And that went on until 1929. And in 1929, the stock market crashed, and it ushered in what was later called the Great Depression. And the party ended, and it ended rough, because the economy tanked, and the people, a lot of people, like thousands of people overnight were without a job, and it was not long after that they were also without a home because they couldn't afford to pay the rent and the mortgage. So that became a complete reversal of what we'd had 10 years before. Now, some people say, well, that was just a coincidence. Baloney. I have to tell you, you cannot say that was coincidental, that we went from being a heathenistic partying country to one in utter despair in less than a couple of years' time. You know, that's God's judgment is what that is. And I think most people who live through it would probably agree with that. Also during this time, and I might mention, you know, we worry about what we're going to have for supper. They worried about if they were going to have supper, or breakfast or lunch for that matter. Also during this time, they had what's called the Dust Bowl days. Nature conspired against us as well. We had a major drought hit the Midwest, and a major heat wave also. And between the two, it generated a lot of wind. And that wind picked up a lot of dirt that was in those plowed fields out there because crops weren't growing. There was nothing but dirt. And it picked up a lot of that dirt, and it headed east with it. And there's probably as much dirt from Kansas and Oklahoma and New York City as there was in Kansas and Oklahoma during that time. We have snowstorms here every now and then, and you'll have wind blow snow up against your house, get a snow drift a couple of feet high. Sun comes out a few days later, it melts it. In those days, they had dirt drifts, and it wasn't a couple of feet high. They'd be as high as the roof of the house, and dirt don't melt. You have to get out there with a rake and shovel and move it if you want to get rid of it, and you had to get rid of it or knock your house down. And these were the days that we were living through throughout the 1930s. And this was just a terrible time. And churches were full. From what I've read and seen and been told, talked to my grandparents about, churches were full. God was very much in vogue in those days. He was very much on people's minds and hearts. The 1940s come along. You got World War II raging. Everybody knew somebody who was in harm's way. We've never had a conflict like that in my lifetime, but in those days, everyone was involved. And everyone was scared because if we lost that war, no telling what would happen to us. Our whole lifestyle, whole way of life would come to an end. And people were praying and begging for God's help. And he gave it to us because we got through it. We survived it. Then the 1950s, all the way through today, came into being. And I think you can see a constant, steady decline all the way to now. Now, there may have been some spikes every time something bad happened, and people would get back in church and get back to serving God. But overall, I think you're going to see there's this constant drop in our morals in this country and the way we perceive God and worship Him. Now, in September 11, 2001, we had a wake-up call. Terrorists attacked New York and Washington, and patriotism and worship of God spiked. There was a big revival in the country for a little while, but that's been 24 years ago. And like everything else, it's kind of tapered off. That trauma has passed, and we don't worry about it near as much. It's not as concerning to us. Ask your fathers and your elders, and they will tell you. Now, unfortunately, there's not too many fathers and elders left from the Great Depression days and World War II. Still have some from 9/11, but those early days have pretty much been delegated to the history books. I had to go to the doctor the other day. I had some prescriptions I need to get filled, and they won't fill them to you unless you can come in and prove you're still alive, and which is getting harder to do every year. But anyway, I went into the doctor's office to get my prescriptions filled, and I'm sitting in the waiting room waiting to be taken back, and they got the TV playing, and I ain't got anything else to do, so I'm watching it. And they're showing an episode of Leave It to Beaver. Now, those of you under probably 60 may not remember, none of you know who that was. This show was popular in the late 1950s and early 1960s. It predates me by a couple of years. But I'm sitting there watching this show because there's nothing else to do anyway, and they're talking about their oldest son, Wally, is going to have a test to take in history, and it's going to be about World War I. And they're quizzing him, helping him prepare for this test. And they're asking him questions that are very technical, very accurate, very well done. I was surprised that they would be that worried about it, you know. But the questions they were asking him were actual accurate questions. And I'm thinking about how impressed I am that they did that in that TV show. But then I got to thinking, I don't remember talking about that much in high school whenever I took history. And I got to thinking further, I don't really remember much about World War II being taught, or the Korean War, or the Vietnam War. Now, they may have, and my memory may just be gone, but I really don't remember having a whole lot. I remember a lot about the Revolutionary War. We talked about that a lot. And I remembered a lot about the Civil War. We talked about that a lot. But I don't really remember us talking a whole lot about these more contemporary wars. And I think the further away we get from them, the less is being taught. My son tells me he don't remember. He graduated in 2012. He don't remember much about these wars being discussed much. And that's not only sad, but it's dangerous. These were important times in our country. These were times we need to remember, and because the same forces that caused these wars, the same radical attitudes and radical ideas that caused these wars, they're still out there. And they could come back to bite us any time, and we don't remember them. We're not teaching our kids anything about them, and if we don't, they're not going to know what to do with it when it comes up. They don't realize the danger to our freedoms that these terrible ideas in those days caused and could have bestowed upon us. We could have been a servitude nation by now if it hadn't been for the men and women who died. Now, I believe that this verse I just read also applies to us here at Oak Hill Church, specifically to us here at Oak Hill Church. If you are a new member, if you've been here, say, a year, and let me say this, we're glad you're here. We thank you for coming, and we hope we're as much a joy to you as you are to us. But if you've been here a year, or say you've been here 5 years, a member that's been in attendance here for 5 years, or maybe one that's even been here for the last 10 years, if you are a member or an attender who has been here for the last 37 years, you have never known a time when we were not financially stable. Now, that's not to say we had money to waste, but we always had enough money to pay our bills, take care of our needs and obligations, and carry out our mission here at the church. Now, if we wanted to build a building like this, we were able to go to the bank and borrow money. That was not always the case. We did not always have that ability. You have never known a time when we didn't have musicians, people who play the piano and lead the singing. You have never known a time when we didn't have a pastor to fill the pulpit. Brother Sam's been with us going on 13 years, I think in November. His predecessor was here 24 years. That's 37 years, with maybe a couple of months in between. That's unheard of for a small country church, certainly for this one. Before that, 5 years was the limit that a preacher stayed. But for the last 37, we've been blessed to have one. If we are not careful, we can become complacent, we can become expectant, and we can take things for granted. It's always been this way. Why won't it stay this way, right? It's hard to know how far you have come if you don't know from where you started. It's hard to know how blessed you are if you don't recognize the blessings because you've always had them. Now, last year I stood before you, I gave a little history lesson on the church. And my thought was to share stories of our past experiences to add to our collective memories. Because like the greatest generation that lived through the Depression and World War II, the generation that lived through those hard times here at Oak Hill are beginning to fade away as well. And I wanted to try to stave off the loss of that knowledge as long as possible, because that is a great resource. And by sharing this with you, I'd hope that it would stay in your memories as well, and so you would be able to recall it as time went by. Every time the church stood at the brink, every time the church looked down to the abyss, every time we started to teeter and maybe close the doors forever, someone came. Now, it may have been a preacher, it may have been a piano player, it may have been a family with children. But in every case, someone came and revitalized and re-energized our church, and we kept the doors open. Now, that was not a coincidence, folks. That was God's hand, just sure as I'm standing here. Now, you may ask, well, why would God care anything about a small country church out here in the middle of nowhere? And my answer to that is, look around. Look around. We are the reason he cared. He wanted us to have a church to attend in 2025, and he made sure this one stayed here for that purpose. We are the results of that. I stand in awe looking out over this congregation at the size and the makeup of our membership. I'm in awe at our facilities that we have here today. 4 big buildings sitting on about 5 acres of ground now. Because 50 years ago, this would have been a dream. Just a dream. And we probably had no idea, really. We need to remember that we stand on the shoulders of giants. Those who came before us are the reasons we are here today, And the next generation, if the Lord tarries his coming, is going to stand on our shoulders. May we be as strong a foundation for them as the previous one was for us. Ask your fathers and ask your elders and realize just how blessed we are, how thankful we should be. Now, this also applies to our families as well. How many of you remember the names of your great-grandparents? What they did for a living? Where they lived? If you do, you're fortunate. Most of us didn't have that privilege. I knew my father. I knew my grandfather. I did not know my great-grandfather. He's passed away before I had a chance to meet him. I know very little about him. He used to work for the railroads, and he's buried out in Memorial Gardens is about all I know about him. My son knows his father. He knows me. He knows his grandfather, my father, although we didn't get to know him very long because he died when he was 8 years old. He never met my grandfather, which had been his great-grandfather. And the only way he'll ever know his great-grandfather is if I tell him about him. Right? If I don't tell him about it, he'll never know it. And when I die, any knowledge of him dies with me. It's hard to know how far you have come if you don't know from where you started. It's hard to know how blessed you are if you don't know how hard your ancestors had it. We need to tell our children the stories of our families, especially how God has blessed and protected them, because it gives them comfort and it gives them hope during their hard times that they're going to be faced with. If they think their forefathers were blessed and taken care of, they might feel the same way that God will take care of them also. But if we don't tell them about it, they don't know about it. You know, we say, well, I don't know much about my family. Well, you know more than they do, if you know anything at all. Share that with them. Now, I don't believe in living in the past, although I do like to talk about it because I am kind of a history buff. And I think that kind of comes natural with age. You like to reminisce a little more. I did reread my devotionals that I've done in the past, and there's a thread of history through all of them. That's subconscious. I didn't necessarily intend that, but in any event, that's the way it is. Now, I don't believe in pining away for the good old days, because the good old days are from selective memories. We throw away all the stuff we don't want to remember, and we just remember the good stuff. And so the good old days were never that good. And if you consider the fact that the people actually living in those days, we're doing the same thing, pining away from good old days 50 years before that or whatever, it kind of lets you know it's not that great. These are the days that we have. And whether they're good or bad depends a lot upon us. But I do think that we need to remember the past, not just throw it away. Because it puts things in perspective. It shows us how far we have come, how blessed we are, and how thankful we should be. Deuteronomy says, remember the days of old, consider the years of many generations. Ask thy father, and he will show thee thy elders, and they will tell thee. So fathers, in particular, and elders, I'd say Moses has given us our marching orders. We have our work cut out for us, both at home, at church, and in our country. We are the guardians of our heritage and the teachers to the next generation. And if we don't do it, like the Israelites, we will forget, and there will be consequences to that. And that was my Father's Day devotional. So I hope, first of all, it made sense, and I hope it was a little bit of food for thought. That's what all this is about, to give you something to think about. So I appreciate your attention. Thank you for coming this morning. Anyone got any comments or rebuttals they want to say? If not, then let's all stand together and we'll have dismissal prayer and I'll let you go home.